Hello, and thank you for joining in today's presentation. My name is Jasa. I'm an environmental sustainability professional intern for Central Community College. I have been the lead intern for the 2015-2016 SLPS, and I'm happy to be able to work on a project like this. Central Community College and the SLPS partners are excited to bring you today's presentation on personal and community health, Nebraska communities taking action for increased walking and biking. This presentation will be focused on Nebraska's Walkable Communities project. I would like to thank the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services and local health departments and leaders for participating in today's presentation. The Sustainability Leadership Presentation Series is brought to you by Central Community College, Joslin Institute for Sustainable Communities, Metropolitan Community College, the University of Nebraska at Lincoln Environmental Studies Program, and WasteCap Nebraska. This series is designed to empower leaders for a sustainable future. Throughout the presentation, please join in the discussion by using any of the following: via Twitter with hashtag SLPSThursday, via WebEx chat box at the right hand of your screen, or give your presentation to your room host. Questions will be answered towards the end of the presentation during the live Q&A. First, I'd like to give a little background on Central Community College's work to increase walking and biking and why. Central Community College is a climate commitment signatory, along with educational leaders and institutions across Nebraska. CCC Sustainability and Climate Action Planning has included a focus on building and transportation greenhouse gases. These are among the college's sources of climate-impacting emissions. Reducing the college's greenhouse gas emissions, along with education on the connection between personal, community, and environmental health, are among some of the college's initiatives in sustainability. So why walking and biking, and why CCC's involvement in the Regional Walking and Biking Summit? Well, first off, CCC cannot be sustainable in a bubble. It's just not possible. Walkable and bikeable communities are needed to help us reduce our environmental footprint at the college. In addition, our work models environmental stewardship to our students. Modeling positive behaviors and practices is an important part of learning. Additionally, environmental sustainability is becoming more important to businesses and organizations around the globe, making it a critical element in student education. These efforts also lay the foundation to make CCC campuses and centers more walkable and bikeable, both on and off-site, which adds energy to the campus life and adds an additional focus on pedestrian safety for our employees and students. Personal and community health is indirectly and directly connected to environmental health, regional planning, and design. These efforts, therefore, directly support CCC's effort of health and wellness efforts for its students and employees. Healthy people and healthy minds support academic success. It also builds more equitable transportation options and access to community assets and resources, which includes CCC's campuses and centers. Equitable access and transportation is important for all students across the nation, and it especially plays an important role in the missions of community colleges. When it comes to vehicle miles traveled, walking and biking also supports commuter students in an effort to reduce these VMTs. This saves often needed financial resources from transportation for education and other living essentials. It adds an increased focus on walking and biking safety, which is crucial for students and everyone. Walking and biking contributes to our community success by supporting many related outcomes or initiatives, such as public health, physical and mental well-being, recreational activities, economic development, and regional vitality. So one example of the college's first actions in these areas is our bike share program. Walking and biking in partnership with Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Nebraska, who provided funding support for the project. In 2015, CCC installed a bike share program for our students and employees of the CCC Grand Island campus. You can see here that they're very hard at work at installing these bike racks. As part of this effort, CCC is currently working towards installing a bike share program on the Columbus campus for the spring of 2016. And right here is a close-up of the bikes and what they look like. Now I would like to introduce the facilitator for the presentation, Jeremy Grandstaff. Jeremy Grandstaff is a is the process architect for the Nebraska Walkable Communities Project. He is an expert in helping clients use collaboration to create change and take action. Some clients with which he has worked with outside of his current work in Nebraska include the City of Detroit Health Department, the National Wildlife Federation, American Public Health Association, the National Physical Activity Society, and America Walks. Before returning to consulting full-time, Jeremy most recently served as the full-time Member Services Director for Alliance for Biking and Walking, a coalition of over 200 advocacy organizations, all working to improve biking and walking in their respective communities. And with that, I'm excited to hand it over to Jeremy. Okay, Jeremy, you should now be...
I already did it.
Okay.
You're good. Excellent. And I'm going to go ahead and remind Jasa, and first of all, just say thank you to Jasa and Olivia, who's running our slide deck today. Olivia, we should now be on slide 22, I believe. And just make sure that you have the camera over. I think we're good to go. Yeah, Jasa?
Yes, we are good to go.
Excellent. Very good. Well, let me first say thank you so much to CCC and your partners for hosting this. This is really exciting opportunity to be able to talk about what's happening in Nebraska. And as Jasa was saying with my bio, I work with a lot of different clients, corporate, nonprofit, and government agencies. And this project is really bringing all of the different types of clients that I work together with on various projects together in Nebraska to support increasing walking, biking, and overall health. It's really exciting to see. And let me tell you what we're going to be sharing with you today. So let's go to the agenda slide. Essentially, what we want to do is we want to give you an opportunity to learn more about the Nebraska Walkable Communities Project. Specifically, how is the project set up, what makes it groundbreaking, and who's engaged in the project to help make it successful. And then I'm going to turn it over to three awesome panelists. Andy, Becky, and Amy are all leaders within their communities. Omaha, Hastings, and Grand Island, respectively. And they are all three also serving as members of the steering committee helping this project succeed. And so they get the opportunity to really talk about some of the local successes that they've had and some of the areas of the project that they've really helped to advance forward. And our goal is that you're able to also spend some time asking us questions, making us dive further into learning about what you want to learn about today with respect to how you can take what you're hearing today and begin to think about how you apply it in your community or even working with the college to apply it as they've been doing as well. And so we're really excited to have all of you engaged and to be presenting on today's webinar. Let's go to the call to action, step it up goals slide. And I love this slide because it helps us understand how this project actually fits into the bigger picture. So the project's funded by the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. And these are the goals from the CDC that the project is actually helping us meet, both looking at how we design our communities, looking wholly at how we design our communities, how we spread the stories of programs and policies that are increasing walking, how we look at gathering information and surveillance and data and research that's going to help us know whether this project is succeeding or not. And so I thought it was good to start with the CDC goals that we're trying to meet, and then moving to the next slide, you can actually see the initiatives for the Nebraska Walkable Communities Project. And I'm going to talk about these in more detail. And then again, I'll turn it over to our panel to even get more specific. We have guiding the project, a steering committee. We have an effort spent on local aspects and engaging our local communities and coming together and applying walking at the local level. We've also We've got a whole part of the process that's developed around messaging and data collection that's going to support making this project successful. Let me give you a little overview of each of those. So we'll go to the next slide, number 26, just to make sure we're on the right page here, Olivia. And as you can see, this is really getting into the steering committee and what they do to support the project. The steering committee, you should know, is made up of a variety of stakeholders, including AARP. The college actually has a person serving on the steering committee. All of our different communities that went through this process in the first year are all steering committee members. We even have some local representation from hospitals and from other partners like planning departments. I did mention AARP already. We're also looking at how do we engage other people like Department of Roads, Department of Commerce, even looking at the League of Municipalities. And so there's a lot of different partners that can engage on this issue. And one of the things that I want to recognize that the steering committee is doing very well is figuring out how to engage new partners, how to spread their technical expertise to the local communities, and really how to make sure that this project is going to be sustainable after the 4-year funding source is up. And so they're exploring all kinds of different things at the state level. Moving to the next slide, we see how this project becomes unique, as it is the only project that we know of that's really looking at the local and statewide push at the same time. And so as we look at the slide number 27, we see the technical assistance piece and where that comes into a play. Each of our communities, starting with the first 7 that went through, ranging from as small as Hebron to as large as Grand Island and Omaha, have all went through community-driven strategic planning processes. And the process was designed so that people could come together, quickly figure out what it was going to take to increase walking, biking, and overall health in their community, and not only figure out what that would take, but set an action plan to get that done. And that's the key piece of this. That's what makes it really effective as a project, is each of the communities then has a plan of action that they're executing, that they own, and that is theirs to help drive forward increasing walking, biking, and overall health. Let's quickly look at slide 28 and 29. So slide 28 really helps you understand the communications aspect of what's happening with this project. We wanted to develop a statewide brand, if you will, called Step and Repeat. And the concept being that it's easy to walk. You just step one foot in front of another and repeat that motion over and over again. It's easy to grasp. We wanted to figure out a way to create that brand so that the local health departments, as they're building their own action plans to increase walking, they've got some branding and some consistent messaging that they can easily tap into as a resource. And then the next slide actually shows us about data and how we're looking at the comprehensive plans. These are tools that are used by a city to govern how biking and walking and other forms of transportation are built and addressed within the city planning. And so we've done some research on how strong those bike plans are, what are opportunities for each community to be able to use that or even change it to better incorporate walking, biking, and related forms of alternative transportation in some of our communities. The last thing that I want to talk about on the next slide is about worksite wellness. And worksite wellness is a key component of this project that helps to engage our business owners, business community, the companies that many of you as students of the college will probably work for someday. And the concept is to help businesses understand how an employee's well-being, an employee's wellness, how much activity employee gets a day can really help to stimulate the productivity and the success of your company, of your employee, and then in turn of your company as a whole. And so I think Andy's going to talk a little bit more about worksite wellness as part of his, but we can always dig into any of this stuff further as you'd like to go. Really what we've learned, if you take a look at the next slide for lessons learned, you can see that the steering committee engagement is a key component of this. So we're really focusing on looking at how we can do that better, how we can provide more technical assistance to the communities and trainings that we are going to specifically develop over the next 6 months that are going to help the local groups as they are advancing their action plans. We want to continue to target new communities. And so there might be one of you on this call right now who says, wow, I'd love to see this where I live. And maybe helping to get your community engaged in that is a way that you can help to move this project forward as well. We want to expand the communications, providing even more tools and opportunities to tap into the step and repeat brand. And of course, see what more we can do with the data pieces of the project, specifically looking at evaluation and making sure that we can demonstrate the value of this collaborative-driven planning process. Now, moving to the last slide of my piece, there's contact information up here for a guy named Brian Coyle, and I will tell you I am not Brian. I'm filling in for Brian. Brian is our primary client on this project and works for the Nebraska Department of Public Health and Human Services. And he was not able to speak on today's call and asked me to fill in for him. So I'm just grateful that I get to fill in for Brian and talk about the great work that's happening. And I'm even more grateful to the three panelists and excited about the three panelists you're going to hear from now. I do want to give a heads up. We had a last minute unforeseen thing that happened for one of our panelists, and so Jessica from the Panhandle is not able to join us today. She was going to speak last, and so if you've got specific questions about the Panhandle, I'll do my best to answer those, or we'll make sure that Jessica follows up with you. So I'm going to ask Andy to start turning on his video. I'm going to ask Jasa to go ahead and turn off my video and move us over to Andy. Make sure Andy's unmuted. And I'll ask Olivia to make sure that we've got slide 30, I believe, unless I've got the numbering wrong on my side. No, I'm sorry, it's 32. For Andy to go ahead and get us started.
Hi, everybody. As Jeremy mentioned, I work for the Douglas County Health Department, which is in Omaha. And so part of what I'm going to talk about is why walkability. I mean, why is this a thing that we're talking about now? Didn't we invent cars, and now that's a much better way of getting around? And so why are we talking about this at all? And so if you go ahead and go to the next slide, you'll see why, from a public health perspective, we're talking about this. So what you can see, this is from actually the largest health survey that's done in the whole entire world. This is about 400,000 people a year that are surveyed in terms of their health, and it's called the Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System. And so you'll see maps of the U.S. from 1990, 2000, and 2010. And this is the obesity rate for our country. And you can see just the major, major changes that happened over really what's a relatively short time. And so this is obviously why public health care is a big part of it anyways, but also other chronic diseases, diabetes being a key one, but also mental health. I mean, there's a lot of connections between physical activity and then things like diabetes or things like depression, and also issues that often are the leading causes of death, such as heart disease, that are tied in with all of this. So huge public health issue. But one of the other things, obviously, is there's sustainability connections, and that's part of why we talked about this at the beginning of the call. And I'm sure you could put up, some scary statistics in terms of all the struggles that we have around sustainability and climate change and all of that would be similar to my public health maps. But what I'm going to point out is that when we're talking with people about struggles with public health or struggles with sustainability, a lot of times we're talking about things that are likely to occur in the future. We're telling somebody that you need to walk more so that 20, 30 years from now, you don't have a heart attack. And that's often a struggle to really motivate people and get them excited about making change. So if you go ahead and go to the next slide, what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about one of the other things that's driving this conversation around walkability besides public health, besides sustainability, and that's really a conversation about place. It's about what kind of places we want to create, what kind of places we want to live in, both at the neighborhood level, city-town level, regional level, that sort of thing. And so this is a picture of a road here. I'm going to talk about the difference between a road and a street. And so this is the West Dodge Expressway through Omaha. And so road, meaning something designed to get you from point A to point B. And so if you go ahead and go to the next slide, what you see here is an example of a street. So you can still get from point A to point B. I mean, cars are still allowed on this. This is the old market in Omaha. And so, but the idea with the street is that there's more things going on here than just people getting from point A to point B. This is a place. This is where people want to spend time. This is where there's things like shopping going on, people just crowd watching, people walking around, all of those other sort of opportunities. And part of what's happened over in our country, especially since World War II, is that we've focused a lot on mobility, a lot on now we have this car, and it's amazing in terms of getting people around really quickly. And so we focus a lot on the getting people around, the getting people from point A to point B. And so we've built lots of roads in terms of how we've designed our communities. And we have done less around focusing on how we build incredible places where people want to spend their time. And so that's part of why the conversation around walkability, because walking is really the way of getting around at a destination. It's the way you get around when you're actually at a place you want to be. So if you go ahead and go to the next slide, this is also part of why this matters. See on the left-hand side, each of these slides is about 60 people. So you've got 60 people there in each of these pictures just to show you essentially functioning as pedestrians, how much space people take up. And then you see on the left-hand side, when you actually put people in cars, how much space that ends up taking up versus trying to have people ride a bus or be on a bike. So it's a huge difference in terms of the amount of land that gets eaten up by transportation. And so if you go ahead and go to the next slide, you'll see part of why this matters. This is downtown Omaha, 1941, and what you've got is in the orange is surface parking lots, and in the yellow you've got garages, so parking garages. And go ahead and go to the next slide. So that's what it looks like now, going to 2010. So that slide that I showed with the cars and the bus and the bikes, this is what plays out in communities across the country in terms of when our only real option for getting around is the car, we then have to build huge amounts of parking to be able to accommodate just storing those cars during the day. I mean, they're not doing anything particularly productive. They're just being parked and stored. And the other thing I'll just mention is we're actually not reflecting on this map all the parking because I don't have underground parking reflected in there. And just to give you a sense, so not only is that a waste in terms of the land because we're not building, another restaurant or another library there, we have a parking lot or parking garage, but also this is tremendously expensive. So basically each surface spot to build it costs about $3,000 to $5,000. That's per space. You're talking about a parking garage, that's about $15,000 per space. Underground parking is about $50,000 per space. That's the construction cost, the infrastructure cost to be able to build it. You still then also have to pay for maintaining it over time as well. But so parking's actually really expensive. You have to end up paying for it, but you just oftentimes parking's free. It's free in the sense that you don't have to pay when you actually park there, but you still pay for it in terms of its cost added on to your rent or your house, or its cost added on to goods and services that you're buying, the cost of your meal, all those sort of things. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So that's part of why that matters, is that when you talk about space, a place, and the kind of places that we want to create, that are going to be places people want to come to our community for, to stay in our communities, that are memorable and exciting, there's this need to balance out place and mobility. You obviously still have to be able to get from point A to point B, but it's important that when you get to point A or point B, it's somewhere you actually want to be. So I talked quite a bit about parking, and this is an issue that comes up on a lot of different levels. So Omaha recently had controversy with the Omaha Performing Arts wanting to tear down 3 historic buildings and build a parking garage and some other facilities with that. If you've been following the news coming out of Lexington, you've heard about the controversy going on there with the mosque, and then the desire for parking. So it's not just a big city issue, the impact that parking has. But again, getting back to, it's just a factor of how much we're sort of balancing mobility versus place. And are we designing places to be walkable so that they actually can function as a destination? So we've got here a map of UNMC that you see before you. And just to give you an impression, all of the gray in there, if you look around, it'll see, say, lot and a number next to it, or, garage and description of a color, different things like that. So all of the gray that you're seeing reflected in that map is all of the parking that sort of surrounds UNMC. So they have a campus, like, many colleges. You've got an actual campus, so things are compact and built close together so you can walk from building to building. But then it's just surrounded by a ton of parking. Same thing, like I pointed out with downtown Omaha, just a ton of parking that's necessary. But as I described in just how expensive those costs are, UNMC's realized, this is really getting prohibitive to continue building more and more parking to accommodate everybody. And so they've created a program called Travel Smart. And the idea is that they want to get 20% of their students and staff to be able to come by some mode other than just driving themselves. So carpooling, taking transit, taking the bus, walking, or riding a bike. And they actually have quite a few facilities in place to be able to make that happen. So they have a trail, the Field Club Trail, that runs right into campus. They have several major bus lines that run through, including something that's working in the works called Bus Rapid Transit. That's essentially a bus that functions much more like a train that's going to be running along Dodge. And so the way their program works is essentially you get things like there's an app for finding somebody to carpool with. You get free transit passes to be able to take part of the program. There's an emergency ride home. So if you came in by, rode your bike, but then you had an emergency and need to get home, there's a way to be able to have a cab come and get you right to where you need to go. So they've gone ahead and are really trying to work out how are these things. How can we go ahead and do things in a different way by making our campus more walkable, by figuring out how transit and biking can work and play into it, because that's actually going to be a lot cheaper for us, a lot better health-wise, a lot better sustainability-wise to do that other than just continuing to build more parking. So go ahead and go to the next slide. And you'll see one of the projects that we did with UNMC, and the engineering term is a walk audit, but we call it a walk it just to reflect that this doesn't have to be something that's sort of so formal and so serious, because the big point is that when you actually get out and walk in your community, you'll just get a different perspective in terms of the kind of things you'll see. So on the left-hand side, you'll see there's a sidewalk there that leads from a neighborhood right near the campus into UNMC. But you see there that the plows have actually plowed the snow so it covers up all the sidewalk. In the middle picture, what you see, those are new buildings that are going into the campus, and there's a new stoplight that's there. And so where the position is sort of the picture's taken from is the actual end of that Field Club Trail that I mentioned. And so what you want is actually an easy connection for somebody so they can go from the trail onto the campus or vice versa if they're wanting to go for a walk during their lunch, that sort of thing. But what you've got is there's that close-up there of the barricade that's fallen down and the big hole in the sidewalk, all of that sort of thing. So there are little things that, again, when you get out and look at it, you'll see some of the barriers that are pretty easy to remedy, but when you actually get out and walk around and see some of those things, they'll make it easier for people to go ahead and be able to walk, ride their bike, take transit, that those things become real options. And just that last picture, just Again, see a sidewalk, that's obvious. That's nobody's really been too concerned about that, not taking care of it. And see just how crumbling that infrastructure is. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So that's, again, just a little bit of the point of, obviously, there are huge public health implications for this issue, obviously huge sustainability implications for this issue. But part of what really matters to people is caring about the particular places, and whether that's your city or town, how invested people are in that, whether that's your particular institution, your particular campus. People care about having a place that actually functions well, that is a place where people want to spend time. And so, yes, have the conversation about health and sustainability. Don't forget that part of this is about how we design places. And if we're thinking about walkability, then we're thinking about the mode that actually fits for when we're at a destination, not just a place we drive through. So that's it for me. There's my contact information. Feel free to give me a call or drop me an email if you have any questions. Thank you.
Excellent, Andy. And I'm going to remind you to please make sure that you turn off your camera and put yourself back on mute. We'll ask Jason to kind of monitor that on the board. And Andy, I just really appreciate, especially setting the stage on why should we care. I think sometimes when we're having this conversation, that's the struggle, is trying to make it important as to why we should care. I want to know what you're hearing from the presentations. Now, my understanding is that we've got several live connections going. I'm sitting here looking at number SLPS Thursday on Twitter, and I'm not seeing anything yet, and that makes me sad. So did you hear something in Andy's presentation that really stuck out to you? Did you hear something that you think people should know? Tweet that and tag it with hashtag SLPS Thursday. We'll make sure that we report those as we're coming through. And again, you be able to ask your questions as well. So don't be afraid to throw out some reactions as you're hearing things. And we'll definitely bring those into the conversation. I am hoping that this has given us enough time to transition over to you, Becky, and let's get your camera rolling and unmuted. Jasa, are we ready to head toward Becky's area?
Yes, we're good to go, Jeremy.
All right, excellent. So I want to introduce to you guys Becky. Becky is part of Hastings, the Healthy Hastings group, and she's going to talk more about that and the work that she has been helping to lead there in Hastings. So Becky, go ahead and take it away.
All right, thanks, Jeremy. So I am the wellness manager at Mary Lanning Healthcare here in Hastings. And I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about our Healthy Hastings Coalition and kind of a group that's been meeting for a while and what we've done to get going and then try to sustain what we have going on. So we first got together probably late 2008. There was a need for some funding for some kids' activities here in town. And so some of us from the YMCA, the YWCA, Parks and Rec, the hospital, the health department, we all got together to try to apply for a Robert Wood Johnson Foundation grant. And unfortunately, we did not get that grant, but it helped us to realize that the conversations that we were having were really valuable and that we wanted to continue those conversations. So we decided to form a coalition, called ourselves Healthy Hastings. And one of the first things that we did was to develop a mission statement and kind of talk about what our objectives were. And so we were able to put that together. And once we kind of got our ducks in a row that way, it really kind of helped establish our path. And so after that, shortly after that, actually, we had the opportunity to apply for an Achieve grant through the National Parks and Recreation Association. That was also in partnership with the Centers for Disease Control. And we were awarded that grant. And that was really kind of the grant that let us take off. Funding is important, and that grant gave us about close to $50,000 over 4 years. And so I'm going to kind of talk about a few of the things that we were able to spend that money on that really helped to get us going. So if you go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So what we did was actually as part of the Achieve process, part of the money had to be spent on training for our group. And so we did all go out to San Diego as a group for training. The Centers for Disease Control put on that training along with the National YMCA and the National Parks and Recreation Association. And we just got lots of information about complete streets and walkability and community coalitions and different opportunities. And so it was a really valuable training for us to get us going. And part of what was required to do that grant was a lot of grant reporting, a lot of data collection. And so we were fortunate to be able to use CDC tools to do some data collection. So that really gave us some starting points. And as part of the grant requirements, we were required to report out on that every year. So we had to collect data during the period of that grant, which really helped us in a lot of ways. And then as part of what we wanted to do, we also expanded our group membership so we could get more community stakeholders in that, which our group now includes kind of those founding members as well as law enforcement, Hastings College, our fire department. We have members from our city council who are on our coalition, Community Redevelopment Authority, our area agency on aging, our Chamber of Commerce. We really have a pretty wide band of stakeholders, which has kind of helped to sustain some of the things that we're doing. If you go to the next slide, please. And then, after we got the Achieve grant, we wanted to continue to apply for funding so we could sustain our efforts. And so we haven't really done a lot of application for large awards like that, but we have gotten a lot of state and local grants that have kind of helped to be able to maintain some of the direction that we started with. And then we also wanted to brand our organization within the community. And so we did develop a Healthy Hastings logo and have tried really hard to have a presence at health fairs and community events, try to have a booth, handouts, awareness kinds of things as we go out into the community, so we can keep that Healthy Hastings name out there and keep people interested in that whole effort. If you go to the next slide, please. One of the main functions that we really ended up focusing our efforts on was that we wanted to do a complete streets policy and strategy within the community of Hastings. And so this, again, funding from that Achieve grant allowed us to bring in some trainers, for some national trainers, to come and really do a community training on what complete streets were, how the whole concept worked. And it was a day-long training that we did. We had about 50 stakeholders at that training, different community members. And in fact, I think in this picture that's on your slide right now, there's the Convention and Visitors Bureau Director, or City Administrator, someone from the Engineering Department, someone from the Utilities, someone from Adams, the county. We really had a great group of stakeholders that came to hear about that and really kind of helped everyone speak the same language, be on the same page, really have an understanding of what we were trying to accomplish. As part of our grant, also we were able to send, actually the gentleman in the yellow shirt in the picture there, he went to further training for engineering, technical kinds of things that were involved with complete streets. And so we were able to use some of that funding to provide him with some additional training. Then the next thing we did was develop a policy, a complete streets policy, that we did get passed to the City Council, and part of that is definitely attributed to two of our very active members on Healthy Hastings are also City Council members, and our mayor also is very involved with that process. And so we were able to pass that policy here a couple of years ago. And as part of the policy, what we wrote in was the formation of an advisory committee. And so this committee meets quarterly, and this is to really make sure that we continue to look at our streets from an all-users perspective. And so this group is comprised of a representative from Healthy Hastings, obviously the Streets Department, the Engineering Department, we have Planning and Zoning there, police come to that meeting as well. And so they really look at the 1- and 5-year plans from the Street Department and look at what kind of work they're going to be doing to the roads, and is there a way to look at these roads for all users as we're reevaluating how we use those. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So we've been in existence for 6-7 years now, and so we've had some good things and some bad things. I don't know that we've really had any ugly things, but definitely some good and some bad. So I'll share a few of those with you, kind of our learning experience, learning curve kinds of things. Some of the good things that happened were, it really was a good thing that we went ahead and took the time to establish that mission, those goals, objectives right from the get-go, because that did really help to focus us. We were a group of event planners that kind of came together. We were always wanting to do, hey, let's do a walk or let's do things. And so getting together and really establishing what we wanted to do helped us focus a little bit more on policy rather than events, which was definitely a good thing for us. And then another thing that we were able to do with that Achieve money was a marketing campaign. And you can see the Share Our Streets logo there in the corner picture. And that was our campaign that we used to just remind people that there are many users that use our streets. To be mindful of that, we have these signs all over town. We also created some banners that we put in schoolyards, just reminding people to stop for kids in crosswalks. We did work with the schools. We sent stickers and different things home with the kids and did some bike giveaways within the schools. We did some campaign pieces that had hand signals on them, bicycle hand signals. Those are a lot of the handouts kinds of things that we use when we do booths at community events. Those are kind of some of that help to fund being able to purchase some of those things to use. We have a really good cross-section of stakeholders, as I mentioned, really great participation from the community. And again, the city involvement has been great. Again, the city council members, the mayor, the police department, the fire department, city administrator, it's just been, the Parks and Rec, it's just been a great collaboration within our community. The funding was really helpful, and that really helped to get us going. Passing the policy obviously was one of our main goals. And then now that we are established, we have had some successes. We hope that that sets us up if we do want to apply for a really large grant again in the future. If you could go to the next slide, please. So we did have some bad things. One thing that happened was when we first started, our Parks and Rec director was actually the one who kind of got us going with that Achieve grant, because it was through the National Parks and Recreation Association. And since we received that grant through them, he kind of became our de facto leader in this process. Well, about the last year of that grant, he moved to Chicago. And we really struggled after that. We were all kind of leaders in the community and lead different organizations, but nobody really wanted to step in and lead Healthy Hastings. And so we kind of met by committee for a while, which we kept going, but it really probably wasn't the best plan. We really lacked structure in our meetings and didn't always have tasks assigned, that sort of thing. And so probably about a year and a half ago or so, I missed a meeting. And so I then became the chair of the Healthy Hastings Committee. Since I was not at that meeting, they voted me in, which is fine. I'm enjoying it. It's a good thing, and we're happy to keep it going. Another thing that I mentioned earlier was that we really had such a focus on the complete streets that once we got that through, we were kind of like, oh, now what? And obviously there's lots of walkability things that we've been working on, and I'm going to talk in a minute here what our next steps are, but we did kind of hit a little bit of a stall after we got that policy passed. The grants are great, but they take a lot of time, and so sometimes our capacity, again, that's kind of why we haven't applied for a really large grant, is just the time involved with being able to manage one. And then we wish at the beginning we would have done a little bit better job with some documentation and evaluation. We didn't do a good job of documenting trail usage or just taking pictures of before and after kinds of things. And so if we could go back and do it again, that's probably something we would have really focused on. You can go to the next slide. So we're excited. We are one of the 7 communities that Jeremy Jeremy mentioned earlier, and we have not done our summit yet. We are doing it on April 13th. And I know our Healthy Hastings group is really excited about this because, as I mentioned, we've kind of lost our focus a little bit. And so we're hoping that this will kind of give us a new guidelines for where we want to go. Walkability may certainly be a piece of that, but we're going to really let our community members tell us what they think is the future for the health of the people of Hastings. And so we hope to have some really great action plans that come out of that summit, and we're really excited to have that going on. I think Amy's going to talk in a minute about their summit, so you can kind of see what that's going to look like. So that's it.
Okay, here we go. Okay, excellent. It looks like I'm back. Sorry about that, folks. So very good. Thank you, Becky, so much for sharing. And I really appreciate where you're at and where you guys have come from. I think one of the things that we always have to remember is that this is a process, and that sometimes creating opportunities to change walking, biking, and overall health can take a little bit of time. And so I appreciate you sharing both the good, the bad, and where you're headed. And again, Becky Summit is on April 13th. It's going to be taking place at Central Community College in there in Hastings. And so really looking forward to that. I think that we've created enough of a filler that we could go back to you now, Amy. Let's make sure we've got Amy's video on. And I'll go ahead and pass it over to Amy to go ahead and talk about what's happening there in Grand Island.
All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. As Becky was just mentioning, I'm going to talk more about the summit process. Grand Island had their summit this last November. So I'm going to go through in detail and kind of talk about the process we went through and just some highlights and outcomes from our summit. So our summit had 4 phases. We're currently in our 4th phase. But we started off with a design team phase, which helped us plan for the summit. We then went into promoting the summit and inviting community members to come be a part of it. Phase 3 was actually hosting the summit and all of the great action items that came out of it. And then phase 4 is actually taking the items that we found through the summit and putting those into action and actually implementing them. So you can go to the next slide. So we started off with gathering a design team of critical stakeholders in our community that would be helpful in advancing the conversation around how do we make Grand Island more walkable and more bikeable. So we spent some time figuring out who those key stakeholders would be and invited them to come be a part of this design team. Our first meeting was on July 22nd of this last summer, and the purpose was to plan for this larger community summit focusing on walkability and bikeability. We had a great, really diverse group of stakeholders that were able to be a part of this team, including our Parks and Recreation Director. We had an Assistant Superintendent of Grand Island Public Schools. We had someone from our Economic Development Corporation. We had another person representing individuals with disabilities or limited mobility. So we really tried to get a broad cross-section of stakeholders involved in this conversation right from the very beginning. And through this day-long meeting, we came up with some common themes around what we thought when we talked about walkability and bikeability in Grand Island. We came up with a purpose for our summit, some of those actions that needed to take place before the summit, and then we decided on a date, which was November 5th of 2015. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So once we decided on a date and kind of had things going, the next phase was then figuring out the logistics and really promoting the summit to the community so we could get as many people there as possible. we developed this nice flyer here at the health department that we printed up and had flyers in English and Spanish. We had posters, and we gave those out to organizations represented within that design team and put them up in strategic locations throughout the community to try to get as many people to come as possible. We also promoted it in our local newspaper, the Grand Island Independent. We also had radio ads, and then we also used social media, so we had it on our Facebook page, on our website, all sorts of different ways, to really just try to get as much community input and participation as possible. You can go to the next slide. Another important part with that was creating a summit registration system. So this is more kind of on our end. It just helped us keep track of how many people were planning to attend. We also had some questions there so we could figure out some basic demographics of who was planning to come, just so we had an idea of the representation. And we were also able to ask a few basic questions just to see what the current use of our hike and bike trails is like, and some behavior around walking and biking, just to get a basic idea of what it looks like currently. We can go to the next slide. In addition to kind of the general promotion to the larger community, we also wanted to make sure we targeted some key stakeholders that weren't currently part of our design team. So we developed these lovely postcards, and we asked design team members to give us a list of some individuals that they felt were really important to be a part of this conversation, that we really wanted to have come to our summit. So we took that list and then mailed out around 200 of these invites to some of those key business and community leaders that we really wanted to have represented. So we can go ahead to the next slide. All right, so then the third phase was then actually hosting the summit. And we ended up having 62 participants throughout the day, which I think is really great. Our summit was from 1 until 7 p.m., so kind of a tough time right in the middle of the workday, but we ended up getting a lot of great participation. The overall purpose of our summit was to create a community-driven action plan for how we can make Grand Island more walkable and bikeable. So we started off with a panel to kind of just have a base understanding of what the issues currently were in the community with walking and biking, and give some perspective on where we were currently. We then went into the action planning phase, where we tried to figure out what are those key areas that we really want to focus on, or what are the key things that we need to do to make Grand Island more walkable and bikeable. And then that led into deciding on key action areas or items that we really needed to focus on. And then taking those, we then voted to determine which were those top areas that we really needed to focus on going forward. So the picture horizontally on the bottom is showing that voting process where individuals were asked to come up and select which areas Grand Island should focus on going forward to make Grand Island more walkable and bikeable. So we can go to the next slide. So out of all of that, we came up with 4 top action items. And based on voting, the top action item was funding, which of course is always going to be a big need with any walkability or bikeability project. Next, there was also a lot of interest in updating our current hike and bike trails. We do have a system in place, however, it's not very connected. So it makes it really tough for an individual who, even for recreation, if they wanted to get from one part of the town to the other, would not be able to do that. So I think there's a lot of need for more connectivity within our trails. We also talked about using social media especially, but just in general, promoting what we have and doing some more education and awareness in the community as far as why focus on walking and biking. And then finally, as Becky was mentioning, complete streets policy was also brought up as something important that we wanted to pursue in the future. And complete streets policies are just a way to focus on making sure that a transportation system works for all users, whether you're in a car, on a bike, walking, or using transit. So we can go on to the next slide. So now we're into phase 4, which is kind of currently happening for us. We are transitioning, or did transition, from a design team to a leadership team that's now moving this work forward. We took some of those raw action or raw summit outputs and made them into a more usable draft work plan. And we also decided to create action teams that could focus on each of those top action areas. And we worked on developing an overall purpose for our work going forward, and then goals within each action team. We're also trying to continue to engage with the larger summit participants, giving them the option of continuing to work with us in action teams and to continue to provide input in this process. So next slide. So we have 4 action teams. Our first meetings were actually held just a couple of weeks ago, so really hot off the press, new work that's happening. So we have our Complete Streets action team. We have the Grand Island Area MTO action team, which we actually have decided that we completed our goal, which was to create a transportation alternatives subcommittee, so kind of a bike ped group within the larger MTO. And then we also have our Walkability education and awareness group, which is just focusing on how can we promote walking and biking in our community and provide more education on why it's important. And then also our hike and bike trails action team. So looking at our current system, how can we promote it and how can we expand it going into the future? So next slide. This is just an example of our work plan, just to give you an idea of what it looks like, our activities, and then looking at who are those key stakeholders or individuals that need to be involved, and then kind of a rough timeline. So we can go on to the next slide. So then I just wanted to briefly give some lessons learned, or maybe some ways that you could use this type of approach in your work or in your community. So as has been mentioned, having diverse opinions and a diverse group of stakeholders is really important throughout the entire process. So making sure you have some of those traditional people represented, such as a Parks and Recreation director, but also thinking really broadly, so thinking about getting businesses involved, or your economic development corporation, your transportation, all of those different key people that might be affected, and make sure you're engaging them early and often, and then really let the community kind of determine the direction of where you're going to go in the process, and make sure that you're clear on your purpose and outcomes all the way through from the beginning. And then it's really important also to have a core leadership team that's able to move the work forward. So having our Walkability design team and now moving them into more of a leadership team role. All right, next slide. And then lastly, I just wanted to leave you with some walkability and bikeability resources that I have come across through my work at the health department and also through a walking college fellowship that I was involved with. So the first 2 highlighted here, America Walks is a national organization. They have a lot of great information on their website highlighting all of the benefits of walking and biking. They also have some resources talking about infrastructure as far as walking and biking. Smart Growth America, they're a great resource if you have any interest in learning more about complete streets. And they have a very comprehensive listing of resources on their website. You can go to the next slide. AARP, they have a great set of livability fact sheets that are easily printed off and you're able to use for things such as economic development. Why is that important in walking and biking? Or things such as sidewalks, So they just have a lot of different highlighted areas and great fact sheets that you can use in your work. And then lastly, Everybody Walk is another good resource just for kind of general walking and biking information. So that is it for me. There's my contact information there if you have any questions, and definitely reach out and I'll be happy to answer them. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much to Amy, and thank you to Becky and to Andy. Listen, I want to hear your reactions. I want to get your questions in. It's time for you as participants to participate in the conversation. And so we want to make sure we're addressing your questions. I've got a couple on Twitter. I think we've got a couple in the chat box. I also want to highlight a couple things that you didn't get to hear today just because Jessica wasn't available. So while you're getting those questions into the chat box, while you're typing in your reactions, remember you can also send those in on Twitter at #SLPS Thursday. That's hashtag SLPS Thursday on Twitter. I'm going to keep looking at those, so let's get those in. Couple successes that Jessica would have told you about. She also went through with Sidney in the Panhandle, went through a planning process like Amy described in her presentation. And one of the things that they've also done in their community is they're about ready to adopt. So it's going for the city council is about ready to adopt a active living advisory committee, which is another tool that when adopted at the city level can really help to spur more walking and biking from an advocacy standpoint. They are also getting ready to release a trails map, which shows people where the trails are in Sydney that they can take advantage of. And I love how, Andy really set the stage for why we care. Becky, you talked a lot about some of the other stuff that has happened over your organization's lifetime, working group's lifetime, and Amy really dove into the process of how we're engaging that bottom-up grassroots thought process in what we're doing. Again, get your comments or your questions in on Twitter at hashtag SLPS Thursday, and also or in the chat box. I want to just quickly highlight from Twitter, there was a great comment that I thought was absolutely awesome, came from CCCH Activities. I'm not sure what H stands for, but I bet somebody can clarify it at some time. And what they wrote was, Andy's information was interesting about the space needed for cars, buses, biking, and walking, and that also why people need to care was really interesting to them. And so I wanted to highlight that as a reaction. Jason, before we take questions, are there any reactions in the chat box that you wanted to highlight as you're just kind of quickly looking at those? It's okay if there are not.
No, none that I've seen so far. Just some people have noticed that there are the 7 repeat outreach programs for Douglas County.
Excellent. Well, you know what? Anytime that we can hear that brand is coming down the pike and more importantly, by the way, is being used at the local level, I think that's great. And that is the balance that you've got with a process like this is how do you create that statewide brand without creating a situation for Andy in the Douglas County Health Department and how they apply it and making sure that it's that dual brand piece. That's one of the challenges that we're currently working through as well. I want to open it up for some questions. I'm going to start with one on Twitter first, and then I'll come to you, Jasa, for questions that I think you've got in the chat room. And so Green MCC writes in a couple questions. Let's give props to Green MCC for their Twitter activity today. But their first question is, what can businesses or organizations do to encourage walking and biking for their employees and users? And I actually want to pitch this over to you, Andy, especially because I know you've been working a lot on the Walk It tool guide, and so I thought that might be a good fit for you. So let's make sure Andy is off mute. And again, Andy, that question is, what can organizations or businesses do to encourage biking and walking for their employees and users?
Okay, so I'm going to throw out a horribly jargony term, but it's called transportation demand management. Okay, so I'm going to say that again: transportation demand management. So Google that, and you'll get an idea of what sort of the field is around that. And essentially, the point is we've been looking at transportation from a supply side a lot of the time. So we build more parking than we really need, or we build roads as wide as we can possibly get them to be able to handle the capacity, mainly for what we have during commute times. And the point with that is, well, let's look at the demand side. Can we have people commute at different hours so we don't have to build so much capacity? Can we have people go ahead and carpool, or work from home, or can we do all the pieces around active transportation? So there are different kind of incentive programs, like what I talked about with the University of Nebraska Medical Center, that employers can put in place to be able to help people to do that. So I work a lot with WellCom, which is our local corporate wellness group, and we've worked on two toolkits, and one is the Walk It guide that Jeremy mentioned, that's mainly about different things that you can do sort of within business hours. Then there's the other piece that's a toolkit that's still under development, but will be released soon, that's about that transportation demand management side, that commuting choice side, like how do you give people actual options in the way that they commute and support them to do that. So that's what I'd suggest doing is contact me about those toolkits, and also just look up transportation demand management to know about the background information.
Excellent. Andy, thanks so much. And I'll also check in with Amy or Becky and ask if you guys have anything to add before we move on to our next question. Anything from you, Becky or Amy? It's okay. If not, that's no problem. All right. We'll move to our next question. Before we do, I do want to clarify also that we are going to have some upcoming webinars, I believe, on the Walk It Guide as part of our training series. And so you can always stay tuned for those. When we get those announced, we'll make sure that Minetta and her team at the college get notification of those, and we can push those out to people who are interested. Jasa, let's come over to you for a question from the chat box. Do you have a question from the chat box, Jasa?
Yes, I do. I have a question for Andy. Do you work only with organizations who ask, for example, NMC, or do you do more public outreach?
All right, Andy, you're back in the hot seat again, although I'm going to actually come to Becky and Amy to also ask you guys about this question as well. So, Andy?
There was a specific ask to do the walk audit with UNMC for that particular work. Two things. One, if you've got an opportunity that you're interested in, give me a call. I'm happy to talk about it and see if it's something that can work. But some of the things that's nice about talking about walkability is that a lot of the things you can figure out, like I said, just by going and just walking around and doing a walk it. And part of the guide that we have is an actual assessment tool in there that'll help you think through the issues to look at when you're doing a walk it. So happy to have anybody throw out an option and ask me if it's something I'd be willing to take part in.
Excellent. And Amy and Becky, why don't you give us an idea of how this is kind of more how do we identify who we're working with in the community, I think. Amy or Becky, anything to add?
I could go, Jeremy. It's Becky. I guess, Hastings is a little smaller than Omaha, obviously. And so, we do at the hospital, through the health department, we do have lots of things that we put out that encourage people to contact us if they have questions on anything. We help with worksite wellness. We do a lot of community talks. We do a lot of different things, like I mentioned before. We try to be out in the community quite a bit, and so we do get approached frequently. And I suppose that there's times where maybe we hear of something that's going on at a certain business or a location or something, and we certainly reach out and see if they need our help at that point as well too.
Excellent. And Amy, I'm assuming you guys work the same way, but anything to add?
Sure. to build off of what Becky said, I think it goes the other way too, especially with the conversation of walkability and bikeability. If it's a new thing in your community, don't be afraid to reach out to an organization or a person that you haven't worked with before, just to start that conversation. For instance, in Grand Island, the walkability and bikeability conversation, I don't think was really on the radar of our city transportation individuals. So just starting that conversation with them has been really helpful to move our work forward.
Yep, and remember that we've got resources available, even some in this presentation, that really do help to make that economic benefit argument that really, I know this is environmental, so there's obviously environmental arguments to be made as well. But I think I will quote one of my friends, Adolfo Hernandez, who was the advocacy director for an advocacy organization in Chicago, and he said, you have to figure out how to demonstrate that walking or biking meet the need of your constituencies. And so sometimes that's going to be economic, sometimes it's going to be social, sometimes that's going to be health, and sometimes it's going to be all of the above. I want to go back to Jasa for another question from the chat box. What do you got, Jasa?
Okay, we have a question for Amy. Hastings has a complete streets policy, and GI, Grand Island, has held a summit. Now that Hastings is going to host a summit April 13th, how can people become more involved in the project?
That's a good question.
An interesting question.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, I guess I can't speak for the Hastings situation, but for what's happening in Grand Island, we do have those action teams that are currently working to take the work that came out of the summit and make it actually happen and implement it. So if individuals are interested in being involved, they can always contact me. I'm happy to get them linked up with an action team that they're interested in, and just to help us maybe bring a new perspective or more ideas. Anyone's welcome to join us.
Yeah, and Becky, I'll come to you in just a minute to give you a second to get yourself off mute. But I think Amy's making a good point. And the question actually helps to make that point as well, which is just because the summit has happened doesn't mean you can't get engaged. And with what's happening in Hastings, you actually have a really good opportunity to engage in their summit, where they're really looking at what else is on our radar. What else should we be looking at? Becky, I'll come to you in case you've got any comments to add on that.
Well, yeah, I guess I just wanted to throw out there that our summit is certainly open to anybody who wants to come, who has an opinion, who wants to get involved. And so, if there's people listening in on this webinar that want to participate, get a hold of me, or there's actually a link on the South Heartland District Health Department website that you can just go there and directly register also.
Excellent. Very good. And let's, just a quick reminder to people, we do have about 15 minutes left before we're going to wrap up, maybe 10. And so I've probably got time for a couple more questions. I do have one that come in on Twitter that says, and I'll come back to you in just a moment, Jasa, can you think of any U.S. cities that are setting a great example of walkable, bikeable communities, or even international ones? And that came in again from Green MCC. The first, what I want to do is I want to actually pitch this kind of as a piggyback question to each of our panelists and just say, what's one city that you really think about when you think about walking that does it well? And what's interesting to me is some of the ones that I normally hold up are right here on this call today. And so I wanted to start by saying that Omaha setting an example in its way. Grand Island, in the way that you guys have already established a MPO subcommittee, is actually setting an example for other Nebraska cities. And Hastings having a complete streets policy has really helped move that conversation forward. So I just wanted to recognize that piece. Andy, give me one city that you think about in the U.S. or international when you think of really doing great walkability, other than Omaha, because I'm sure that would be your first choice.
Well, part of what I'm going to do is say that, you know what, just about every city has parts of it that you can point to that are designed to be walkable. You know, our older neighborhoods, our downtowns and main streets were built that way. And so, yeah, you can show people examples from other cities and that part of the helpful conversation, but that can also generate pushback. So don't be afraid to use the places in your own community that are designed to be walkable and highlight them as, you know, things that we can emulate in other parts of our community and build from. So rather than throw out particular examples, because I will say Jeremy can answer that question far better than I can. That's my 2 cents.
What I love about what you're saying, Andy, is actually really true. When we brought America Walks out for kind of some site visits and looking at our first 7 communities, Becky, I'm coming your way next. One of the things that we found really interesting is there's a lot of places in Nebraska, Hebron, Superior, Lexington, even Grand Island, Hastings, where you do have that what I would call small town walkable downtown, and where just making some really quick improvements, more seating outside or something like that would really help to even make it more walkable. So, Becky, what's a city you think about when you think of walking, biking? They're doing it well?
I guess I think of Boulder, Colorado, actually. When you drive kind of down one of their really main, very busy streets during even rush hour, you know, there's signs posted that say, to yield for pedestrians and crosswalks under punishment of law. Some really strong wording, and you see a lot of people using their streets for all sorts of purposes: walking, biking, skateboards, all different things. And I guess that pops into my head when I get asked that question.
Mm-hmm. Good. Amy, what do you think of?
I think the first one that comes to mind for me is probably Seattle or Portland. Those 2 cities really kind of are the forefront of walking and biking and have a lot of participation, high percentages of people that are walking and biking, not only for recreation, but their transportation to get to work or any of their daily needs. So those 2 really kind of pop out in my mind.
Jason, coming to you next with a question. I just want to say that one of the reasons that I always hold back my answer to that question is because every city is a little bit different, but as Andy said, there's lots of walkability built into most of our cities. And sometimes it's about really stepping back, giving yourself the time to walk to that meeting that's 10 blocks away instead of driving in your car. And what you'll start to see as you do that more is that there are more places that are walkable than we realize. And we're actually seeing that in some of the work that we're doing in our smaller communities, the Panhandle and Sidney, for example, with their trail map, recognizing that they had a really great walking system and pointing out some of those areas that are walkable would be great. I've got time for 1, maybe 2 burning questions. If you don't ask them today, this webinar has not been worth your time to attend. Remember, you can get those in at #SLPS Thursday. Jason, you got any more on the chat side of things?
Yes, I do. I actually had a follow-up question to Amy's. I have about 5 more questions that we could still probably get to. I think there should be some time.
Let's do a quick hit on them then. What's the first one?
Okay.
We'll do a round of fire here. Go ahead.
Okay, the follow-up question was for the question that was asked about the summit in Hastings. They just want to know if they go to the summit, is that how they become involved in the project, basically? Okay,
so this is going over toward you, Becky, and because Becky is actually the leader that we have hosting the Hastings Summit. And so, Becky, do you want to just give us a 30-second on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think coming to that summit would be a great way to start to get involved. As Jeremy's mentioned, we'll come away with some action plans, and we absolutely need community involvement for that to happen. So if there's someone that wants to be a part of that, please come and get involved. Yes.
Excellent. We're going to go right back to you, Jason, for the next question and see if we can hammer these. As we do that, I just want to say, in Grand Island, they've already had their summit, so you just need to contact Amy if you want to help with Grand Island walking and biking stuff, and Amy can get you into that. And her contact information was also part of the presentation today. Jason, what's our next question?
Okay, the next question is anyone working with Nebraska Builders Association to ensure sidewalks and bike lanes and paths in the new developments and building these things back into older neighborhoods as they update infrastructure?
Just for sake of time, I'm going to answer this one. If my answer isn't what you're looking for, feel free to follow up with me or Brian Coyle. We have Herb, I forget Herb's last name, but he is from the development community in Omaha and does have a relationship with that organization. We are working to engage developers in this process, and so if you are connected into the development community or that particular organization, we would definitely welcome participation both in our local efforts and what's happening and at the steering committee level. It's not that we're not trying, it's just they're one of probably 20 different groups that we want to get engaged in this. Next question, Jason, what do you got?
Okay, this question is actually more directed towards Minetta. It's about the bike share program on the Grand Island campus and how well that's doing so far.
Minetta, can you give us a 1-minute overview of what you're seeing in that program?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So the bike share program was launched in 2015 with funding support from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Nebraska. 5 bikes that students and employees of any CCC employee can check out on the Grand Island campus. The program is not even a year old yet. It's a little over 6 months old, I believe, and has been going very well. We've seen participants using the bikes for riding breaks at lunch. We've seen participants using the bikes for actual transportation. They take them home, which is allowed under the bike share policies that the college put forward. So they take them home and return them or notify facilities if it's going to be an extended checkout. The program is free, and we see them being used for a lot of different reasons and for different situations. So we're very happy with its very young start.
Minetta, just a follow-up question. Are students using those too? Are they able to use those?
Yes, students and staff of the college can check it out for free for as long as they need. We ask that if it's over 24 hours that they let us know so that we can plan appropriately because it's not a permanent checkout. And we have had students and staff using them. It's been a mix.
So students on the call, this is a really, going back to what Andy had talked about with transportation demand management, show them that you want to use them. The best thing for a bike share system, believe it or not, is when we have to end up buying more bikes because too many people are using them. So that's a way to create more demand and get more bikes out there for you to use is to start using those. So Jason, let's come back to you for other questions.
Yes, I have another question. Do you know how much success there has been in Omaha with reducing bus fares in the summer?
Andy, this is totally getting pitched over in your neck of the woods.
I don't know specifically about reducing bus fares in the summer. That's not something I'm aware of, and I just might be missing that. What I do know is that they've set up several programs with the universities for the reduced fare for students and staff to be able to use the bus to be able to get to campus, and that's a big part of reducing the parking demand for those campuses. But then the other thing I'll just mention is, Omaha's bus system really has had a bad rap for a long time, but they've done some really major revamps to the system over the last couple of years, and it really is in a very different place from where it used to be. And so much easier to start talking about transit as a real option for people these days.
Excellent. We've got about 7 minutes left, and I'm going to come back and check in with you, Jason, on questions. Before I do that, please, we want to know what you're taking away from today's conversation. What has struck you as something you've learned? What is stuff you want to know more about? what are insights that you've had? If you can go ahead and tweet those out as with the hashtag SLPS Thursday, put those into the chat box. Maybe Jasa can cover some of those reactions as we're wrapping up in her wrap up. Jasa, how many more questions do we have?
We have about 2 more questions we can get to.
Okay, what do you got?
How long from starting planning to seeing more walkable and bikeable community results?
I'm going to cover that just for sake of timing and say it varies depending on where the community is and what they're up to. A process like what we're using to help jumpstart things and get the community engaged in that conversation is anywhere from 6 to 9 months. Before you actually see on-the-ground successes, it can be anywhere from 9 to 15 months, depending on where the community is. So it is a process. I don't want to make light of the idea that it takes time. I will say that by getting the community engaged and getting your stakeholders engaged in that conversation can really help shorten the time frame. Next question, Jasa. Remember, get those reactions in, hashtag SLPS Thursday on Twitter or in the chat box. Jasa, last question.
Okay, this one is for Becky and Amy. It's kind of a long one, but bear with me. Would you be interested in UNL Environmental Studies program students working with your projects? They have students needing internships and research projects. They also have a course called Environmental 319 Community Engagement, where students work in small groups to develop solutions to issues posed by clients. The solutions are then presented to the clients at the end of term in a professional presentation, and this would be no cost to you.
Okay, I'm going to ask that question this way. Andy, Amy, or Becky, is there one of you who wouldn't want some interns to help you advance your work?
Sign me up.
Yes, interns would be wonderful to help us.
Of course. Of course, we could use some help.
Absolutely. I think so the way that you laid that out is absolutely fantastic, and I think whoever asked that question, I think it's really great. We need to move toward the wrap-up of today. Remember, if you've got reactions that you'd like to share, we want to see those on Twitter with hashtag SLPS Thursday, and also put those into the chat box. Jasa, I'm going to turn it over to you to wrap up. Before I do, I just want to say a big thank you to all the partners on today's call. A huge round of applause to Andy and Amy and Becky for their hard work, their leadership on this project. A big thank you to Brian Coyle from the Nebraska Department of Public Health, who is the primary contact and sponsor on the Nebraska Walkable Communities Project. You can find information at hashtag WalkNE or Walk Nebraska. And remember, get those reactions in the chat box or on Twitter at hashtag SLPS Thursday. Jasa, if you're able to fit in some of those reactions, if you've got any in your closing, that would be awesome. And I'll turn it back over to you to close it out for the day.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. Yes, just a couple of reactions. Good presentation. Another one really informative. And that's all that I had on my end. So I would just like to thank Jeremy, Andy, Becky, and Amy for that excellent presentation and your great work on these initiatives in Nebraska. And also thank you to the SLPS partners and all our viewers for joining us today. Today's live viewership was approximately 72, so thank you again for all your participation. Our final presentation for the semester will be next month, where the University of Lincoln Environmental Studies program will be presenting on the theme of natural science and systems. So please join us again on April 7, 2016 from 3:30 to 5 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.